Welcome to 100 Huntley Street, Canada's home for hope. And hope is the word you're going to hear a lot about this week, because we are taking the entire week to explore how faith connects to our mental health and how we can strengthen our mental health no matter what we're facing. Now, joining me as a guest co-host this entire week is Daniel Whitehead, CEO of Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a privilege and a joy.
It's such an important conversation that we're going to have. And, you know, you've dedicated yourself through Sanctuary to educating churches and parachurch ministries. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Sure. So Sanctuary is a non-profit founded right here in Canada, in Vancouver, which is where I'm from. It's my home. And we've been going for about 10 years. And it's been remarkable seeing over those last 10 years a shift in the church's response to mental health. And our whole focus is how do we serve the body of Christ, help the body of Christ become a safer place for people's mental health.
Yeah, I think it's such a really cool and incredible resource for faith communities. And I think a lot of pastors struggle with what to do. You know, this week is so timely. Stats show that 1 in 5 Canadians are living with a mental illness. And over a third of those say their mental health needs are unmet. And at the same time that we're facing this mental health crisis, we're also hearing here at 100 Huntley Street that God's on the move across Canada. Now, we think that's got to be good news for our challenges, because faith is one part of the healing we receive in our mental health journey, right?
Absolutely. Faith is a really important part of the mental health journey. I think the church really should be a place of belonging, hope, purpose, and community. And that's what the church has to bring the area of mental health.
Yeah, I'm so excited about what we're going to unpack this week. Now, you have 5 pillars of mental health that you talk about in your work with Sanctuary. Can you just give us an overview? We're going to unpack them every day. But
Sure.
Just before we go deeper into it, just give us an idea.
Sure, absolutely. So when we talk about these 5 pillars, we talk about mental health as a continuum. We talk about the recovery as a journey. We talk about companionship, walking alongside people. Fourthly, we talk about dismantling stigma, the need to really address that issue. And then finally, self-care as a sacred practice.
There's so much that I am looking forward to unpacking about these. You're going to love it. I know you're going to finish this week with so many different tools and strategies that will support all of us in whatever we are facing. So make sure to join us every day this week. You're not going to want to miss a day. Well, to kick it off, I recently had the chance to speak with Dr. Curt Thompson at the Cheryl Mental Health Summit. Now, his specialty is interpersonal neurobiology, which I know is a mouthful, but you're going to be fascinated by what he's learned about the human brain. We're going to be featuring this interview over the next 2 days because it is amazing. So here is part 1. Who really knows you, and why does deep connection matter? We're going to unpack that today, and I'm joined right now by Dr. Curt Thompson, who is a psychiatrist, author, speaker, and the co-host of the Being Known podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited for this conversation about community and connection. Now, let's just start with what your specialty is, interpersonal neurobiology. So could you just simplify that for us?
Sure. It's a bit of a mouthful, I understand. Interpersonal neurobiology is a general field of study that includes a number of scientific disciplines that all have a stake in 2 questions. Number 1, what is the mind? And number 2, what does a mind look like that is flourishing? We have all kinds of data that tell us pretty easily what a mind looks like that is not flourishing well, that is sick, that is unwell. But what does a mind look like that's actually well? And so that is a field of study that's emerged over the last 20 years that has helped us answer that question. And as a psychiatrist, it's been a great joy to be able to apply these scientific principles, especially working with people within a faith community, because it really gets at this notion that God never leaves himself without a witness. God is even using principles that we're discovering in this particular scientific discipline to speak back into how we operate as human beings, and as it turns out, really reflects very deeply what we learn about, read about, and encounter that the biblical narrative tells us that it means for us to be human beings and what it means for us as humans to flourish under the lordship of Jesus.
Now, you've really centered in your talks anyway, a lot about connection. And you gave a piece of information that really fascinated me, which is that a baby, only 10 to 15% of a baby's brain cell can do what it's supposed to do by itself.
That's right.
So can you just unpack that for us?
So we say newborns come into the world roughly, on average, having about 100 billion neurons. And about 15 to 20% of those neurons are able to do what they are doing and enabling that newborn and infant to do what they're supposed to do. But in order for them to grow and to move from newborn to infant to toddler and so forth, it requires them, and for their mind to expand and flourish, it requires the rest of those neurons, about 80 to 85%, to be fired by having an interaction with another human being. This, of course, might put pressure on parents, but in fact, we're doing this all the time by looking at our child, by speaking with our child, by holding our child. So it's not as if we have to give them a PhD right out of the womb, but it is a matter of our interacting, being attuned to them, and it doesn't mean that we have to be attuned to them all the time, but it really emphasizes how who we are becoming is deeply relational in its fundamental elements. I'm not a person who, in my siloed self, just happens to grow up in a family where they feed me and they're nice to me, and then I go off and get an education, and then I become who I want to become. I'm only ever becoming who I am in relationship with other people, and my capacity for growing into the fullness of who I am called to be, and therefore to do the works that have been prepared for me before the foundation of the world, is to develop as I was made, in God's image, as a social creature, not as an individually siloed one.
I think this message is so timely for the world we live in. And I think of babies who maybe don't have that. You know, you say that every baby is born looking for somebody who is looking for them. Mm-hmm. If that baby is born and is looking for that person, but no one's looking for them, you know, let's say in an orphanage or an environment that has a lot of neglect, what is the implications of that then for their development?
Well, I think in some respects, it doesn't really take a psychiatrist to help us guess that things are going to be much more difficult. I think it is important to recognize that God has made us as fairly resilient creatures. There's a lot that we do well in spite of a great deal of trauma, a great deal of tragedy. And the other good news is that even for folks who in the early developmental stages of their lives may not receive what is ideal for them, the really beautiful news is that the brain is never beyond the capacity for change.
Wow.
We have had numerous stories told of people who are older in life, who, of course, imagine that because things happened when they were younger, traumatic events that took place when they were in the first 2 decades of life, but now they're in their 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s. There's nothing I can do about the past because the past has already happened. The really beautiful news about what we're discovering over the last 20 years about the capacity of the brain to change, especially in the context of relationships by whom I'm being deeply known, is that it's never too late. And then we look at the Bible and we think, oh my goodness, Moses was 80 years old when he got the call. He was 40 years old when he went into the desert. God waited for 40 years to get him ready to do this. 80 years old. Abraham, 75 years of age. Nicodemus comes to Jesus, seemingly as an older teacher. These are people that God is confident in working with, in many respects, we would say now, because we've actually seen the organ that God has put between our ears and the capacity that we have for change that really gives us hope that Paul talks about when he says, therefore, don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that renewal for Paul, though he would not have known necessarily about how many neurons we have, is not just metaphor for us today. It is an embodied and relational change that's taking place that's a reflection of the gospel.
I love the hope that you're giving there. And I think it's so interesting that you're a psychiatrist. So, you know, obviously you've learned about the problems that we can have with our brain functioning well. And yet you speak with so much hope and life. And I love that. I think that's what the gospel is. You also talk about energy that happens in a room and that really matters. Why does it matter that we understand the way that the energy is happening between us and other people?
Well, again, without our knowing it, we have been, as we like to say, we have been atomized in our world. The dominant narrative in the world that teaches us that human beings are machines and we are individual machines also teaches us that I am the most important let alone only thing that's happening in the room, even with other people. Now, I might be able to recognize that there are other people here at the party, that there are other people here at the conference table, there are other people here in this conversation. I may recognize that. But I'm not really that aware of the role that this network of human beings together are playing in shaping who I am becoming. I think one of the beautiful things about some of the work that we are doing is that out of this has emerged our awareness of what I would call the mass effect of human relationships. If a person sits with a psychotherapist over a certain amount of time, there will be a certain amount of change that takes place. If that same person sits in a room of community members who are vulnerably doing the same kind of work that that patient is doing collectively, the pace and depth of which that change takes place is much different. Because my capacity for receiving empathy from one person is very different than when I receive it from 7 other people at one time. My capacity to have people in my memory when I next have to go do a very difficult thing is very different than when I only have one person. And so this body of Jesus effect that we once again read about in the scriptures is something that we would say Paul is not just using this as metaphor. Paul is using this to highlight that we as a body are making a difference in the world. I'm not expected as an individual to make a difference just by myself, even though I think that's what I'm being asked to do. But I'm being asked to live this life in Jesus collectively as part of this social net that itself is helping to transform who I'm becoming.
And I know when I use the word energy, some people are thinking it's something new age or good vibes or something like that. Can you just break it down a little bit? Like, what do you mean when you say energy?
Well, I quite literally mean energy. Like when we talk about energy that comes off of our power plants and energy that comes from, neuroelectrical feeds, these kinds of things, when we're talking about quantum mechanics here, really. When we are talking with someone in the room, it's not surprising that when I'm with someone that I really enjoy being with, one could later go and watch a video of that interchange, and we could notice how the energy between us, the way we talk to each other, our body language, all those kinds of things might be very different than if I'm talking with someone who's boring me to tears. It's going to just be a very different kind of hangout, as it turns out. But the point being that this energy that we have within us and between us is the world that God has made. We as creatures of the earth are not separate from the earth. We are actually creatures that are communicating with each other. 60 to 90% of all human communication is nonverbal. It doesn't have to do with the words. It doesn't have to do with what my logical, linear thinking brain is comprehending. It has to do with what my voice is saying to your voice, what my ears are hearing, the vocal tone, the eye contact, all of those are gestures. All of those nonverbal cues are sending signals, literally because of the light waves and the sound waves that communicate things to us. And so one of the things that we really focus on when we are inviting people into this transformational process is an invitation for them to consider that others that they are going to encounter today, those others' lives are going to be different because they've encountered the beauty that is emerging from within you. Most of us don't walk out of our front doors thinking, oh my goodness, I wonder whose lives are going to be different and better because I showed up for them today. I'm just trying to get through my freaking day. I'm not imagining these things. But my capacity to imagine that I am the light of the world, as Jesus speaks in Matthew chapter 5, right? I'm a light because I am a reflection of this, like I am the light of the world. My capacity to imagine that has everything to do with the degree to which I myself feel like I have been loved. And that's where community makes all the difference. It's my encounter with God personally, and also how that is reinforced and strengthened and thickened by virtue of my encounter with others through whom God is also equally loving me.
Join us all this week on 100 Huntley Street as we help you foster resilient mental health and well-being, learn from leading experts, and experience hope and healing in every area of your life. We are your home for hope. Well, there are so many things I pulled out of that interview with Dr. Thompson. We could talk for an hour about it, honestly. For me, even what he said about is every baby is born looking for someone who's looking for them. And you were saying off camera here that what about moms who are on their phones while they're breastfeeding? That baby's looking for that eye contact, that connection to their mom, and we're missing it because we're so digitally addicted.
Yeah. I read some really interesting research about that very phenomena. And I think one of the things that we've learned in the last 20 years, as Curt was saying, is like child development is just such a key part of our well-being, right? Those early years. So even, that little newborn baby that's breastfeeding is looking to the mother's eyes to be seen, to be looked at. And that's what we all want, right? To be seen.
Yeah, I always make fun of people when I walk into a room and they're all on their phones and they're all together on their phones. I actually don't mind that personally as an introvert, but I go, I see you guys are really connecting. And there probably is a bigger narrative around our digital addiction in terms of our connection to each other and the energy we give. But anyway, moving on, we promised to talk about the 5 pillars that Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries unpacks. So let's just start today with pillar number 1. What is pillar number 1?
Yeah, so pillar number 1 is mental health as a continuum. And it's really this idea that often in my upbringing, I was encouraged implicitly to see mental health as kind of you either have good mental health or bad mental health. But the continuum really flips that and says, no, mental health lives on a continuum from flourishing to languishing. And all of life is a journey moving between flourishing and languishing. And actually, when you relook at Scripture, you see lots of people in places of flourishing and languishing, and God is present to all of them. God is at work in all of these circumstances. So I think it's a much more hopeful way of understanding the subject of mental health. And what we remember is no matter where you are, whether you're flourishing or languishing, whether you have a diagnosed mental illness or not, because mental health flourishing is not the absence of a mental illness. There are many people who live with a mental illness who are really doing well and flourishing. But the point is, in all of these circumstances, God is present to everyone.
I really love that way of looking at things because it breaks down the us versus them. Like you are struggling with a mental illness. I am not. Yeah. It's like, no, we're all on this continuum at different times in our lives. I might have just lost somebody in my mental health. I'm not doing well. Yeah. Tell me how this breaks down stigma, because that's something we really want to do with this week, and we really need to do in faith communities in particular.
Yeah, and I think what my mind immediately goes to the subject of time, because often the challenge with mental health is you can say, well, this person is mentally ill or this person is really struggling in their mental health, and we can other them. We can make them feel like there's something wrong with them without meaning to. But actually, if we think of time differently, we can go, okay, well, you may be struggling today and I may be flourishing, but next week, you may be flourishing and I'll be struggling. And when you're struggling, I will hold you up. And when I'm struggling, you will hold me up. So it really removes that sense of us and them. It says we are all in this together.
Oh, I just love that. I could sit on that point for a little bit. And I think too, we have all or nothing thinking in our mind too, even just for ourselves. So not even thinking about you and I, but for me, it's like either I have a mental illness or I do not, like we can be very all or nothing. So when we're in a low place, it can just be like, this is going to be my life forever. I'm always going to be struggling. We get very catastrophic in our thinking, right? Yeah. So how does the continuum help us kind of get out of that all or nothing? Like I might be low now, but maybe not next week.
Yeah, I think the continuum really gives us hope that things can change, that flourishing is possible. If we think about the kind of environment we place ourselves in, what disciplines are we putting in place, what boundaries are we putting in place, who do I spend time with, who don't I spend time with, what do I do, what don't I do, we start to think about these rhythms, we can actually find flourishing once more. But I think the key to us finding flourishing is always relationships. It's always having people around us that love us, that can model how God loves us. I think that's just so critical for people.
Yeah, and that's why reducing the stigma matters so much, because we're going to push people away that are when they're struggling if we don't understand that we're all on this journey together.
Yes.
And, you say there's a lot of different dynamics that affect mental health under this pillar of a continuum. What are some of those dynamics?
Yeah, so at Sanctuary, we tend to talk about the biopsychosocial spiritual reality. So we have biology as Curt Thompson was telling us. We are bodies. We have a psychology. We have brain chemistry. We have social relationships. And then we have a spiritual reality. And I think one of the key things to remember is that we are all of those things all of the time. We are never not any of those things. We live with that reality. And I think sometimes we can try to silo these things out and go, well, no, like on a Sunday I'm spiritual when I'm at church, and when I'm at the gym I'm physical. But in truth, we're all of these things all of the time. And all of these areas can impact the others positively and negatively.
Yeah, when we think about the spiritual side of things, like, I think when I was growing up, it was kind of like, just pray and God will heal you, or just, it seemed like it was like it's either 100% spiritual or it's just a medical issue.
Yeah.
But I love how we're unpacking it into different categories. So talk to me about, how that's shifted from just pray. Yeah. Why don't you feel better?
Yeah, and I think actually sometimes churches can fall into the trap of oscillating between those two realities. They either go, well, we just need to pray more, read the Bible more, that will fix things. Or they go, no, you just need to refer people to doctors. And I would say actually both are really good practices. Like referring people to professionals is really important. But if you do that to absolve yourself of the responsibility of being a good friend and being uncomfortable, then I'd say, well, no, you've got a problem. Like theologically, you have a problem, because we're called to support one another. So I think it's about living in the tension of both and accepting that both are true all of the time. And if that feels uncomfortable, but so what? That's like, it's uncomfortable, but be in that discomfort. And I think if you can do that for someone, then you can actually see them heal, which always happens in relationship.
I love that, you break it down into like social, there's physical, it could be chemical, it could be working out more, it could be a gratitude. Like we're learning so many different aspects of it. And one of those things is never just the answer. Like you have to approach it from so many different angles. And I think about somebody who maybe was struggling maybe with their mental health and then got better, like maybe applied something, got better, and then went back. And so how do you deal with that? How do you encourage someone about that? Because sometimes I think, when it gets better, you think, okay, now I found the solution.
Yeah, I know. And I think it's one of the challenges, or dare I say it, dangers of testimony. If testimony is used carelessly, it can cause everyone in the church to think that unless my story has a neat and tidy bow put on it and everything's fixed, my story doesn't count. And I just renounce that. I don't think that's true. I think my life is a series of flourishing and languishing. There are situations beyond my control in this world which bring me down. And quite frankly, they probably should. We're meant to have compassion. So I think for someone who's found a place of flourishing and they're back to languishing, what I would say is this is a normal, healthy part of being a human being. This is how God has made you. And the truth of God is not just on the mountaintop, it's also in the valleys. The Psalms say that God is just as present in the valleys. You have to look differently to find him, but there are things you can only learn about God in the valleys, which is what we see in the Psalms of Lament. People who go through the depths, God, where are you? And then at the end of the Psalm, they're proclaiming God because they've found him in the depths of the darkness.
I was honestly going to bring up the Psalms as the very next, because I'm thinking, David, you see that with him. He starts in despair many times and he's pouring out his heart. And then he starts encouraging himself and saying, no, but God's still faithful. God, you're, and please come and slay everyone who's giving me a hard time. And, his emotions are so raw. And I love that because that feels like safety. And, one of the things that we really see with the stigma that happens is that people get isolated. So they don't feel like they can approach God. They don't feel like they have community support. And I just want to remind you, for everyone watching today, no matter what you're facing, whether it is a mental health challenge or something else, support is available and you never have to go through anything alone. Literally, we have made these prayer lines available to you 24/7, trained the nicest people. We're very picky. And the people who answer the phone are wonderful. And they are there just to pray with you, And I think sometimes when you're struggling with something, you don't always have the words even to know what to say, to even know what to pray. Sometimes that pain is so deep. Well, we want to be there for you. Please write this number down and call it and use this resource. Don't be too proud to pick up that phone or too scared, because it's going to be a wonderful experience. That's 1-866-273-4444. If you're not ready to make that call, just send us an email, prayer@crossroads.ca, pray for me. You can go to crossroads.ca. You can chat there with a digital pastor who'll be there to help you. And you know, we are all about prayer here at 100 Huntley Street, because we know we need supernatural help to make it through this life. And we know that the connection to our Father God can shift our perspective, can shift our circumstances. So we have a beautiful resource for you this month to grow your prayer life. Take a look at this.
This month is our thanks for your ministry support of Crossroads and 100 Huntley Street. We're excited to offer the book, A Passion for Prayer. 7 classic Christian writers share timeless wisdom and experience. From the powerful insights of Charles Spurgeon and the bold faith of George Muller, to the deep devotion of D.L. Moody, Andrew Murray, and other historic Christian teachers. This treasured collection brings together 7 voices who shared one unshakable conviction: whatever else I do, I must pray. Their writings invite you into deeper communion with God, offering practical guidance, spiritual encouragement, and clear reminders that prayer truly transforms lives. Whether you're growing in your prayer journey or seeking renewed passion, this book will inspire you to draw near to God daily. With a gift of $50 or more, or when you become a new monthly partner, request your copy. Call 1-800-265-3100 or visit crossroads.ca/prayer.
And we're so thankful for your support of this ministry. You know, when you give here, you enable us to bring encouragement every day, create theme weeks like this one, diving deeply into mental health and diving into the issues that impact us on our journey, like we've done one on finances just last fall. You know, we all need that encouragement, and that information can lift us up and help us not just to survive, but thrive. So this book, A Passion for Prayer, it's 7 classic Christian writers sharing their timeless wisdom and experience, some of the most amazing writers in Christian history. I know it will encourage you. We'd love to send that out to you. Please give us a call, 1-800-265-3100. You can go online at crossroads.ca/prayer. And we are so grateful for everything you do to keep those prayer lines, this program, these special weeks going.
That's right. Thank you so much for your support of this ministry. We also have another incredible resource available for you this week. It's a 5-part Bible study called Faith and Mental Health. It also includes powerful video teachings that will accompany each day. It's just one more way we invest in your life, and you can download it. Download your free copy at crossroads.ca/study guide. Also, you're going to want to tune in all week for our Hope and Healing for Mental Health focus. There is so much great content ahead of us. Cheryl, tomorrow we're going to see part 2 of Curt Thompson. Tell us, what are you going to dive into?
Yeah, I love this conversation with him. We're going to talk about the importance of community and why it's so easy to give love, but so much harder to receive it. So it's a fascinating conversation, because we'd much rather be helping others than receiving help ourselves. That could be called pride, but we'll see what Dr. Thompson has to say tomorrow. As well, later this week, Lara sits down with best-selling author Kay Warren to talk about journeying through the death of her son by suicide. And I can tell you her story is honest, heartbreaking, inspiring, all at the same time. It's a special 1-hour special, 100 Huntley Street, airing this Wednesday. I was here when we recorded that interview. It was heartbreaking and so powerful. And, you know, her story is so much more common than we realize. I had so many people talking to me about their own experience, even people that were present who had just lost someone, death to suicide, within a few weeks of that day. And we need to talk about it, right? Because there's so many emotions that come into a situation like that, guilt, or I wish I had done this, or I wish I did that. And I know for many of you, you may have known somebody that you've lost in that way, and maybe your grief is very complicated and you really haven't been able to move past that. So write down Wednesday. You're going to want to tune in for every other day. We're excited to have you back, Daniel, and unpacking those 5 pillars. Unloading is probably the wrong word. Unpacking those 5 pillars of mental health that Sanctuary teaches. So yeah, don't go away. Join us tomorrow. Join us Wednesday. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining us.
Bye.
Thank you for your ongoing support of Crossroads, a supporter-funded nonprofit organization and member of the Canadian Centre for Christian Charities. Thanks to faithful people like you, we are able to continue producing 100 Huntley Street. You can write to Crossroads, P.O. Box 5100, Burlington, Ontario, L7R4M2, or visit crossroads.ca to learn more about our programs.